Yes, according to public records, the Minister of Finance met with SNC Lavalin representatives after the. Actually, Mr. Chair, we are. I'm afraid, sorry to disappoint you, but we are getting into it.
We are not.
And I know you want to cover it up, but you're not going to cover it up.
Do you want to?
Actually, it's not going to work. I have a button here, and you're not going to silence me. My job is to defend the accountability of Parliament. I am not going to be silenced by you or anyone else. You might have silenced Jody Wilson-Raybould, but you're not going to silence me.
Mr. Poilievre,
Mr. Liberal Chair, I do have the chair, Mr. Liberal Chair. Mr. Liberal Chair, I do have the floor, and I invite the parliamentary secretary to.
Could I get a technician in here to pull that mic at his mic?
To answer the question.
No.
I invite the parliamentary secretary to answer the question.
Mr. Poilievre,
you look awfully afraid, Mr. Chair.
Listen,
you look awfully afraid.
Do you know what?
What are you afraid of?
Listen.
Why can't you have the question?
Can you pull his?
Why can't you have the question?
Point of order over here.
Why can't you answer the? Why can't you allow the question?
Because
you're afraid.
No,
you're not going to silence me.
Mr. Poilievre,
you are not
for a minute
going to silence me.
You know, when members don't abide by the rules of committee, Parliament is in trouble. And when the chair,
you're in trouble.
When the chair rules that you are out of order, you are out of order.
I have found you out of order.
I would say to the technicians here, we have to find a way at committees when a parliamentarian is not abiding by the rules of committee, because the chair has the right.
Point of order.
When you are not on.
Point of order.
The topic to cut you off.
Point of order.
I have a point of order over here, and then we'll come to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, we're here this morning to discuss Bill C-82 and also to look at the pursuant to Standing Order 81 interim estimates 2019-20, votes 1 to 5 under Department of Finance, vote 1 under Financial Transaction Reports Analysis Center of Canada, and vote 1 under Office of the Superintendent of Financial Institutions, referred to the committee on Monday, January 28, 2019. Mr. Chair, I've been on this committee since I was elected and had the privilege to serve the residents of Vaughan Woodbridge. We're here to do the work of our residents. We are here today to analyze and to ask questions from the Parliamentary Secretary, Mr. Lightbound, and the officials. Thank you for being here again. And I'm sorry you're having to witness
point of order.
Such behavior. We are here to talk about C-82 and this reference. The material that Mr. Poilievre has brought up has nothing to do with what we are here to talk about. And I'd like to have a ruling on whether we need to stick to the material or we wander off in some fishing expedition.
Okay, you're getting a little beyond a two. Mr. Poilievre, point of order, and then Mr. Massey, point of order.
Ironic, isn't it, that Mr. Sorbera only wants to talk about the tax treaty now? Because a moment ago, he talked about numerous subjects that aren't in the treaty. He talked about unrelated tax policies. He talked about infrastructure projects. He talked about child benefits. He talked about a tax credit for workers. He talked about the small business tax rate. None of those things are in the treaty. And yet, Mr. Chair, you allowed them to be discussed without interruption. So it is very interesting that all of a sudden, now that the subject has become unfavorable to your party, you have slammed your gavel and behaved in a way that helps protect the Prime Minister's office.
What's your point of order?
My point is, if they can talk about things not in the treaty, I can talk about things not in the treaty.
Now, Mr. Sabera, on his comments, talked about issues that are relative to the general finance. The floor is back to you, Mr. Poilievre, and please stay on C-82 and the estimates. There is a. I know you're trying to say that that I'm trying to shut this down. No, I'm not. There is a place for those questions to be raised. There's appropriate committees if it goes before it in terms of that issue. I believe the Justice Committee is dealing with this issue. And there's also the House of Commons where you can raise anything that you desire to raise. But this hearing today, as it states on the order, is on C-82 and the estimates are quite broad in terms of the finances of the nations. We have a deputy minister here as well with Mr. Lightbound and other officials. So the floor is yours, and if we can stick to that, it'll be great.
Well, the government and the committee are of the view that deferred prosecution agreements are a matter for this committee. That's why they put them in the budget, and that's why this committee was responsible for approving it. So we are on topic. The question I have here is, what was the purpose of the minister meeting with SNC Lavalin
Mr.
when he did so? Actually, it's in order because it's my time, and I will ask the questions I choose to ask. I will ask the questions that I choose to ask. Actually, sorry, I have point of order.
No, he has a point.
I'm afraid, Mr. Chair, you're mistaken. I have the floor.
No,
I have a point of order, and my point of order. I have the floor.
Can you cut his mic?
I'm sorry, you can't silence me, Mr. Chair.
Thank you,
I know
Mr.
you're
Chair.
trying to silence Jody Wilson-Raybould.
Can you cut his
cannot
mic?
silence.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Then you're going to have to get you're going to have to get the technicians in here to
Get
find
the
a way to
technicians
cut
in
his
here,
mic
and in the
because he's
meantime,
not
we'll try to get to the truth.
Mr. Mr.
Chair? Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. I know that you're trying to silence any debate on this issue because you don't want the truth to come out.
You do not.
And you have attempted to silence a former minister of the Crown by inappropriately applying solicitor-client privilege. You are not going to silence members of the opposition. You are not going to shut down Parliament and avoid accountability on this issue. It is the job of this committee to hold the government to account on matters of finance. I'm not the one interrupting, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, the point of my intervention is this: the government has said that this is a finance. That's why they put it in the budget, and therefore it is the job of the finance committee to ask questions of the finance minister in relation to his interventions on the matter.
Meeting suspended.
I am asking.
I suspend the meeting.
There you go.
We're not going to have.